Good morning. We'll call the meeting to order, and I'll acknowledge Commissioners McDonald and O'Halloran on the phone. I expect we'll be joined by Commissioner Levy as well. Call for motion and second to grant leaves of absence to Commissioners Pierce and Saruta, who are out of town, and to Commissioner Chamberlain, who's homesick.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. Now I'll call for a motion and second for approval of the minutes of the special commission meeting, of September 10th, 2019, and the regular commission meeting of September 11th, 2019.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. Curtis, if you could provide the executive director's report, please.
Great. Thank you, Madam President. Stan, I wonder if you could start us with a safety message for the morning.
Certainly. My message today expands on the preparedness theme that was started last month. This October, Fire Prevention Week and the Great Shakeout are consecutive weeks. Fire prevention and earthquake drills enjoy regular discussion and resiliency planning efforts in the workplace, and now is the time to bring safety home using these campaigns and resources. This week is Fire Prevention Week. Since 1922, the National Fire Protection Association has sponsored Fire Prevention Week, which is the longest-running public health observance in our country. The purpose of Fire Prevention Week is to bring awareness to the risk of death in the case of fire and provide educational resources to people in order to keep everyone safe. Each year focuses on a different element of fire safety, such as examining places fires could start for hazards like your kitchens, laundry, garage, or space heaters, or obtain and learn how to use portable fire extinguishers for places of concern, or test your smoke alarms, maintain your batteries and proper function per manufacturer's recommendations, or plan and practice your escape. Resources for Fire Prevention Week are made available at www.firepreventionweek.com. And then next week, join the port and over 650,000 other Oregon participants and millions worldwide in the Great Shakeout earthquake drill on October 17th. Millions of people worldwide will practice how to drop, cover, and hold on at 10:17 a.m. on the morning of October 17th. Oregonians can join the event by registering their family or organization to be prepared to survive and recover quickly from big earthquakes wherever you live, work, or travel. By participating, you can learn tips on how to get 2 weeks ready and craft your own emergency kits. Port employees' families have been having fun creating their 14-day emergency kits for home and go kits for their car over this last month. And the Great Shakeout will culminate the port's 4-week preparedness challenge at home and allows us to train our plan and on our planned response in the workplace. And resources for the Great Shakeout are available at www.shakeout.org/Oregon. Curtis, that's
Terrific
my message.
Thank you, Stan.
Yep.
And just in light of what could be one of the shortest commission meetings we've ever had, I've got a few comments this morning. First off, I want to thank our public safety team and our police officers. We had an officer-related shooting at the port about a week ago. Our team responded in exactly the way they should have. We have a few lessons learned, but was really proud of the work and reaction of the port team and our partners in that incident. It's just a reminder that you never know what's going to happen day to day inside an airport and around an airport. In the end, the public was safe and our officers responded appropriately. And so I'm just really happy that it turned out well. We're going to take the lessons of that incident and apply them to the future. So just really want to acknowledge the hard work of the team and the really consistent response of our public safety team. 2 days after the Great Shakeout, we'll have the Hillsborough Airport Airfair, Saturday, October 19th. It's the 19th annual airfair. We really use it as an opportunity to share what goes on at airports with the community, tours, flight simulations, local food, and family-friendly activities. Everybody's welcome. You can register for the airfair on the port's website. Last week, the port hosted a media event with the Oregon Department of Transportation and TSA on Real ID. We've talked about it many times. This is a situation that is really driving toward next year, July 2020. Oregon will begin issuing Real ID compliant identification next July. Kristen, am I getting the dates right? And the deadline for having an ID in hand to fly in a federal facility is October 1st. So there's a pretty tight window for folks to get that new ID, but there's an easier way to comply, and that is actually having a valid passport or passport card. You can check the Oregon or Washington DMV websites for more information. We're focused on it. We're trying to talk about it a lot and just remind people that it's going to be rough if you show up at the airport after July with just an ID and it's not July 2020. After October, sorry. After October, thank you. You can see how complicated it is. You won't be able to board your flight. So it's something that's really important for people to get through their head. Post-July 2020, IDs available. October 1st is the deadline to have one of those or a passport. You may have noticed we submitted, I signed a letter that was released about a week and a half ago from West Coast Ports to President Trump, really talking about the impact of the trade war and tariffs on ports and on our regional economies. The West Coast ports are responsible for 38% of all U.S. exports to China by value. It's a very important factor in our economic sustainability. Certainly in Oregon, we rely on the export of wheat, hazelnuts, a wide range of products, manufactured goods to Asia, and the uncertainty around tariffs is something we wanted to raise to the President's attention. Once again, good news around the airport. J.D. Power and Associates ranked PDX #1 in traveler satisfaction among large airports. Once again, for 2019, for the North America Airport Satisfaction Study. You see in front of you, commissioners, and commissioners on the phone, we have one for you, a Portland Monthly, an entire issue highlighting the airport and things that go on here. Once again, the J.D. Power work and this Portland Monthly really point out to the people who are here at the airport how important the concessionaires, the security people, everyone doing work, including our volunteers over there every day, and we're just really proud of another recognition. Finally, PDX Next, a lot going on out there. I saw one of our teams out on Packer this morning doing a review. We're really moving along with the e-concourse extension, TBOW. The most recent addition is a new permanent exit from the headquarters employee parking lot, which opened last week, creating a much safer route for employees to exit on the toll plaza. And the public exit is on schedule to open next month. So the pieces are all moving along. It's something I hope to keep you informed on as we move through here, but really happy on safety performance and a real focus on both our contractors and our employees on completing that work safely. So, Madam President, those are my comments for the morning.
Thank you, Curtis. Before I call for a motion, I believe Commissioner Levy's joined us on the phone.
Yes, I have.
Great, thank you. So I'll call for a motion and second for approval of the Executive Director's Report.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Do we have public comment today? Okay, thank you. We have a couple of consent items on the agenda. If any commissioner wants a presentation on the consent items. And I believe, I know I have a question. I think Commissioner Alexander has a question on the investment policy. So I don't think that calls for a presentation, but maybe, Dion, if we could just ask a couple of questions. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you. I think my question is brief. I just want to have a sense that we're sort of forward-looking on the investment policy. I note that it's not particularly specific, but want to make sure that we're thinking ahead to potential downturn and how the investment policy might play out if there's a downturn in the markets.
The investment policy doesn't directly address rates. We consider that in our daily activity, and when we make investments, but the policy doesn't specifically address that.
Okay. So your sense is that it gives you enough leeway if there's a downturn that you can manage the percentage that you're holding in any particular type of security as you need to.
Right. So there's flexibility there to be able to make investments if the market, say corporates are paying you to make that sort of credit risk. There's flexibility to do that, flexibility to not do that.
Okay.
So that you can manage credit risk and rates with the flexibility built into the policy. It's kind of intentional so that we don't have to come to you every year and make big changes. We don't manage the policy with the market. It's meant to be flexible so we can address those market changes as they come.
Okay. Thank you.
It makes sense?
Yes. That was absolutely my question. Thank you, Commissioner.
All right. First of all, I appreciate the framework. I think it was very well constructed. I was curious as to whether there was involvement with fund managers who are partners with you in this work in overseeing the investment portfolio for the port. And my question had to do with whether the port has done extensive work over the last several years in expanding equity lenses to key business functions. And I'm curious as to whether that played into this framework and whether social responsible investments sort of are a part of how we evaluate potential fund manager partners.
So we don't use outside resource to manage our investments. That's all done in-house through state statute and our policy. But as far as when we choose investments, that's definitely a consideration. We look for the best market rate and who is giving us that offer. So if it falls in line with an investment that also is part of a good social investment with our equity lens, then we would certainly make that investment. I would say our biggest resource for that right now, we can invest in World Bank, International Bank of Reconstruction and Development, and they are worldwide, so it's not necessarily in our local community, but they do really good things in the developing countries with wells and microloans, and off the top of my head, the list is really long, but those are an opportunity for us, and I do take advantage of those when the rates pay us to do so. We don't necessarily buy those at a financial loss, but if they're in the market in a line with others, then we can do 5% of our portfolio in something like that. So that would be part of a corporate investment under the corporate 35% total, 5% one issuer. So really that falls in line. Different corporate investments. This probably gets too detailed, but even federal agencies, federal farm credit agencies like that are giving loans to farmers. A lot of those are in Oregon, in our local communities. So there are opportunities. We also have locally a small CD with a bank that gives microloans. So we look for those opportunities all the time.
All right. And I commend it, and it would be great, wherever possible, to sort of lift some of that out, because it's a part of how we do what we do. And we don't want to have it lost, because it is a very intentional.
It is intentional. It is part of our focus, and it is also in your quarterly report. There's a detail provided of per issuer what we have, and those are also noted on there. And I can provide more detail with that if you'd like, but every quarter that is also part of your package.
And then this is kind of a perverse flip side, but are there investment pathways that we are very clear on avoiding? And I don't want to get into political,
that gets tricky.
prison industry. I mean, are there things that we have essentially said we don't want to find ourselves on the inside of that consciously?
In all honesty, a little bit. I do sort of steer clear. They're not really in the market right now. They're not, but in past years, some of the fossil fuel corporate names, we used to be able to buy like Shell Oil, and we would kind of steer clear just because we had other opportunities to make the same money. So it would be sort of like a name we would just avoid for some of those more political reasons, but they're not in the money right now, so it's not really something we have to decide. Rates are kind of going down. Corporate names are not highly rated enough. They're not AA. There's very few AA right now. So where there is an opportunity, we take advantage. But heavily right now, it's federal agencies. It's really who's paying us. to
Thank you.
yeah.
The Madam President did say that she had a shorter question than I did. So
I'm sorry if I get too detailed or not enough. Just
Thank
let me
you.
know. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much, both of you.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks.
Any further questions or need for presentation on either of the consent items, which are Commission Policy Number 6.1.2 Investments or Consent to North Urban Clackamas County Enterprise Zone? Okay, hearing none, I'll call for motion and second for approval of the consent items.
So moved.
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Kristen, if you could come forward to introduce the agenda item, please.
Good morning. So Dwight and I are here to request a personal services contract in relationship to Willamette Cove and our Portland Harbor Superfund responsibilities. And we had talked, I think it was August at our commission meeting, we had spent some time talking about the administrative order that we had just entered with EPA as it related to doing the kind of the early design work, sampling and design at Willamette Cove. This was the partnership with the city, the state, and as kind of we are all taking on being the performing parties. And then the federal government is also a party, but as a funding entity. So thinking back to that conversation, one of the elements that we talked about is this entering a consulting contract that Dwight is going to go over with all of you, that basically our consultants will shepherd us through this entire process around design for Willamette Cove. Before I steal any more of Dwight's thunder on this project, because he'll go through all of it with you, I do want to point out we had discussed the fact that the port took on this role of the RFP process. And we were really excited about some work that we had done at T4 around an RFP process and bringing in Portland Harbor Community Coalition members to be part of the process with us. This has not historically been done. We did it successfully at T4. We felt like it was a great program, some lessons learned. We did that again with Willamette Cove, and instead of one individual, we had two individuals joining us from the community in that process. I'm just here to say one more time, I think we're starting to get a feel for what could really be a best practice for us in opportunities like this RFP and really bringing in the community from the beginning. And I also want to call out, because this is no small amount of time, the commitment from our volunteers. And so I want to say a thank you out into the world to Renfis Villatoro and Michael Pouncil. They're both community members who spent hours and hours going through all this process with us. So I wanted to take the opportunity with the microphone to just do a shout out to the community for joining us. So with that, I will turn it over to our Harbor Environmental Manager, Dwight Leisel, who will go through the elements of this consulting services contract.
Thank you, Kristen. Good morning. Today we are requesting your approval for a personal service contract to GSI Water Solutions to move forward on cleanup at the Willamette Cove site and the Portland Harbor Superfund site. The primary work is to start the remedial design for cleanup. As Kristen mentioned, at the August Commission meeting, Jessica Hamilton, Director of Harbor Cleanup, and Teresa Jacobs from our legal department provided an overview to the Commission on signing an agreement with EPA to initiate cleanup at Willamette Cove with our project partners, the City of Portland, the State of Oregon, and the U.S. government. Jessica noted that we'd be back to the Commission for approval of future contracts to do this cleanup work, and this is the first of those contracts. The Port and our 3 project partners are each funding equal 25% shares for this work. Willamette Cove is located on the east bank of the Willamette River, approximately in the center of the 10-mile stretch of the Portland Harbor Superfund site. It is shown in this picture on the left as the Cove area just downstream of the Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad Bridge. The site is about 5 river miles downstream of downtown Portland. The upland site is approximately 24 acres of open natural area. The Port owned a portion of the upland from 1903 to 1953, where we constructed the public common use shipyard known as the St. John's Ship Repair Yard. The St. John's dry docks moved to Swan Island in 1953, and the Port had no further ownership interest in the site. Metro acquired the entire Willamette Cove site in 1996 under a public bond measure. The Port and Metro have been under a voluntary cleanup agreement with Oregon Department of Environmental Quality to clean up the upland. This contract will provide the services and resources to initiate the final cleanup of the in-water portion of Willamette Cove in coordination with the upland work. The overall scope of the personal service contract is to provide technical assistance on the design of the in-water cleanup at Willamette Cove. This contract is not to construct the cleanup, but rather to do the planning, design, and other related work to get us to the point of constructing the cleanup. The cleanup construction will be a future separate contract that will require separate commission approval. So the bulk of the contract scope is associated with completing the remedial design for the cleanup. The scope will include project management and pre-design site investigation to ensure the cleanup meets the goals and objectives established by EPA to be protective. We anticipate this work will take approximately 4 years to complete. The scope also includes support services to assist us on providing public outreach and planning. This is a unique site. It has a lot of public interest, and I'll speak more of that in a minute. We went through a competitive process to solicit potential environmental and engineering firms. We received 5 proposals, with GSI Water Solutions being the selected firm. Of note on the solicitation process, we increased the weight on the social equity scoring from 10 to 15%. This criteria is in line with the new Port policy, which seeks consultant commitment to social responsibility and community involvement. We also had increased involvement from the community on the evaluation team to select the firm by having 2 community members from the Portland Harbor Community Coalition. As Jessica mentioned at the August Commission meeting, we were looking for opportunities to engage with our community in new ways, and we're excited about the deeper relationships we're developing with key community stakeholders, including the Portland Harbor Community Coalition. And finally, although the Port had the consultant procurement process, was the lead for the consultant procurement process, our project partners were also represented on the evaluation team, and this project will be very much a collaborative effort with our public agency partners. As I mentioned earlier, we anticipate the design work to take approximately 4 years to complete, which runs into 2023 and the end of the contract. Separate contracts will be procured for construction, technical assistance during construction, and post-construction monitoring. As you can see from this schedule, the timeline for completing construction is 2026, and post-construction monitoring will extend out into the 2030s and beyond. The $6.5 million is the estimate we believe to complete the remedial design. Other costs will include agency oversight costs for EPA, DEQ, and tribal governments. The contract costs and the agency oversight costs will be shared costs with our project partners, with each funding equal 25% shares. Each of our project partners will bear their own internal costs. Total budget for this design phase is estimated at just over $8.1 million. The port contribution for this project is estimated at just under $2.4 million. As we move forward, the costs associated with these components will be further refined. Based on an availability analysis, the port's Small Business Enterprise Program participation goal for the RFP package was 10% of the total estimated value of the contract. GSI Water Solutions proposed 22 to 26% SBE participation in its bid. The contract goal has been set at 26%. So finally, staff is requesting approval of the recommendations, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments from the commission? I will say first, thanks to port staff both for leading with respect to getting this cleanup started. I see that the timeline is long before we're done, but we needed to get started, and I think it's important that the port led on that and brought our other governmental partners along on that, on our timeline. And second, with respect to the community involvement, again, a huge kudos to everybody who's participating, including the community partners, as well as staff who engaged with them. I think it's really important on projects like these to involve folks who have been affected by activities of the port over a long period of time. So thanks for that. Okay, I'll call for a motion and second for approval of the executive director's recommendation.
So move.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.